To me, sport is vitally important. On a personal basis, over the years, many of my friends are people who I've met through sport and football and across the different sports. And I can make a case, and usually did make a case to most government ministers, that sport and physical activity could change people's lives. For a short time, I was the Minister for Prisons. What's the busiest place in a prison? It's the gym. So sport, from my perspective, can and does change people's lives. But today's title is The Business of Sports, and I've brought together a panel. Apologies for the non-diversity of the panel. That's my fault, because a couple of people who I've invited are unable to attend. But I hope you'll understand and acknowledge the wealth of experience we have with our panellists this afternoon. And we want to talk about sport and business. What does that actually mean? For me, it means employment, it means jobs, it means contribution to the economy. And if we're truly going to talk about the Northern Powerhouse, then why can't sport be part of the discussion and the devolvement of powers that come down? Sport can bring people together. You don't even have to speak the same language to be able to play the same sport. So it has that opportunity as well. So I'm going to stop at that point. I'm going to ask the panellists to introduce themselves and say a couple of minutes about what they think about sport and the business, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. So if I can start off with, on my immediate left-hand side, Rick Parry.
Thank you very much, Gerry, and good afternoon, everybody. I spent, I guess, a large chunk of my life in professional football, first of all in forming the Premier League in the 90s, then running the club of my dreams, Liverpool, which was even more of a dream job than Gerry's. Most of the time, it was a dream job when it was going well. It was a nightmare job when it wasn't going well. But fantastic to be involved. Since then, since leaving Liverpool 2009, I've been, I guess, travelling the planet a bit, mainly eastwards. Again, mainly involved in sport, football, plus other sports, with, I guess, a growing emphasis on the integrity of sport, which is a really important and very topical issue. Anybody who's been following the story of FIFA, the IAAF, cycling, tennis, you name it, there's a whole bunch of integrity challenges which are not going to go away. But again, as you travel eastwards, the thing that I've found fascinating, Middle East, and then particularly now, China. I think from a football perspective, but also from other sports, what happens in China over the next decade is going to be absolutely fascinating. And the more you travel, the more you tend to realise that your old picture of the world, the primary school atlas, where Britain was always at the very centre, that's not necessarily viewed right across the planet. The pendulum is definitely swinging. But as Gerry said, it's for me, sport at the Liverpool level, and I apologise for the elitist aspect because that's what it was, and I'm a lifelong supporter. For us, the key value was all about winning things. It wasn't a business, it was a sport, it was a contest, and it was about trophies. You have to run sport on a business-like way, and you have to use the right skills, because otherwise you're wasting resources, but for me, it'll never be a business. First and foremost, it's about passion, and of course it's about participation. If you look at the way that people are now participating in cycling as a result of the success we've achieved, it's, who would have thought that it could have that sort of impact, not least in Yorkshire, of course, with the start of the Tour de France, etc.
That's right.
So is that enough from me to kick off?
That's fine, Rick, to kick off with. Paul Porter.
Okay, thanks very much, Gerry. Some of you might recognise me from the 8 years I spent working here, setting up and running the boxing academy at Bradford College. I'd been in the sport of boxing for about 30 years up to that point. I'd spent a long time promoting the sport within education, and I was looking for one project that I could give a few years to and really see what we could do with the sport particularly within an FE college. I wanted to do it within FE because an FE college is a great kind of hub. You can reach down into the schools from it, you can reach out into the community, you can reach up into the local university as well. And that model worked really well. 8 years ago, September the 8th, 2008, I started out with, I had one coach working for me here, and 2 bags of boxing gloves, and one of the Bradford College directors saying that they would have boxing in Bradford College over his dead body, and he's still with us, but he's not with Bradford College anymore. So and boxing is properly established in the college. Over those 8 years, we've gone from a position of having 2 bags of gloves and finding little corners in the dance studio to do boxing sessions, and all over the college wherever we could fit in, to having one of the best purpose-built facilities in the country, which was a joint project between the college, Bradford University, the local council and Sport England through the Amateur Boxing Association of England, as England Boxing was then. And we've taken it from a position where we had, basically we would take on any boxers who came through the door, mostly beginners, to a point where we now have a conveyor belt of boxers going from complete beginners all the way through to the Olympics. So in the Rio Olympics, Mo Ali represented his country, his club, but also Bradford College. We've got 2 good prospects for Tokyo, and I have to say that Bradford is a very special place to me, because I think it's been a great nurturing environment for the success of boxing. On the business front, it's at a position now where it needs some drive into the boxing academy, where it can become a really significant national centre, and can start to bring a lot more money into the local economy.
Thanks, Paul. Wayne.
Thanks, Gerry. My name is Wayne Jacobs. Obviously, we all believe sport and know sport plays a major role in our country. It certainly played a major role in my life. I was involved in professional football for 25 years, and as Rick said, not to be elitist, but he mentioned Liverpool. I'm one better than that. I played for Bradford City for 11 years, so that tops Liverpool, doesn't it? But no, in truth, if we're talking business and sport, we're talking the economy, and if I can personalise it like this, forgive me, I'll move that away. If I could personalise it like this, I was a young man who came from a broken home, some real issues within the family, and was struggling. But as I've said, I played sport, and that sport gave me an emphasis, a focus. It taught me some social skills. It taught me how to goal set, and all the things that are important in the world of business and affecting the economy. I've since gone to use all the things I've learned in sport and become a CEO of a local charity that works with children and young people to give them that focus to affect their well-being, and to look at how we maybe can help them become work ready. And in doing so if we're talking about sport and business, as I say, we're talking about the economy. If I can just give you some figures here. For some of those young people that we work with in disadvantaged areas, not always the end, the finish of where they hope to be is the place they land, and this is what the impact that has. It costs £65,000 to imprison a person in this country. It costs £40,000 a year to keep them in there. The NHS, poor health-related problems, costs us £11 billion a year, and to the taxpayer, 16 to 24-year-olds on job seekers allowance costs the economy £22 million a year. So when we look at the impact that we can use sport for on our economy and our local economy, it can be used in such a positive way.
Thanks, Wayne. Nigel Harrison.
Hi, I'm Nigel Harrison, Chief Executive of Yorkshire Sport Foundation. We run the county sport partnerships of West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, and our main role in life is to support organisations to get more people playing sport and be more physically active. So I'm coming at a much lower level of standard and grassroots than some of my colleagues here around the table. When we start talking about sport and business, there's direct contribution to the economy through the sports industry, and that accounts in Bradford to something around about £140 million a year, which accounts for about 1.5 to 2% of GDP of Bradford. Only 1.5 to 2%, it sounds small, but it's still £140 million to the economy. But it's much, from me, it's much broader than that, and that carries on from the work that and the discussion that Wayne started around the effects of sport and physical activity on wider benefits. And that sport and a healthy sports sector in a town and a city will attract businesses into it because it is part of the culture and this is part of the vibrancy of a city. And I know other cities are talking about attracting 25 and 35-year-olds into it. It's the new professionals and so on. And sport has got a place to play in the environment of the city, and it has here in Bradford. And then we've got obviously the health benefits of Bradford and what physical activity can do for you, not only for people being healthy, but also a healthy workforce. So it's a broader aim. We ought not to just look at those jobs and those employment in sport and those businesses directly in sport. It's about the impact of sport and physical activity in the wider economy and how that makes Bradford just such an attractive place to be.
Thanks, Nigel. And last but not least, Richard Kramer.
Gerry, thank you. My name is Richard Kramer. I'm a solicitor. These days, you would probably come across quite a number of sports lawyers in the country. I really started off probably 22 years ago, and I almost fell into it by chance. A rugby league club very close to here, Keighley Cougars, had found itself just about to get promoted into the top division of rugby league. This was before the creation of Super League. Super League was then formed, but Keighley Cougars, despite investing for years and years into the club and making it a community club, did not find themselves in Super League. And I was giving some general advice to the club and then found myself involved in this sort of 4-week whirlwind of politics and court cases, and that was really what springboarded me into it. I suppose if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it now, but I do enjoy it. It's not the easiest of jobs, but really the way lawyers have become involved in sport is quite prevalent in this day and age. I would say most Premier football clubs not only will have one sports lawyer or an in-house counsel, they'll have 3 or 4. That's the way it's developed. All sports governing bodies will have, again, 3 or 4 in-house solicitors, and many of the large firms in London are practically doing the departments that are really working in sport on a full-time basis. And that's really because despite the purist idea that sport is sport, I think whether we like it or not, it has become an enormous business. Where there's money, you'll find lawyers hovering around it because lawyers will be there to protect their clients. And just kind of really picking up what Rick says, when we see that the way certainly sort of football in particular has gone global, and now there's a bigger influx of investment coming in from China, and that is again going to attract a lot more legal work, and we can see more foreign owners taking ownership, whether it's soccer clubs, rugby union clubs, rugby league clubs. We are going to see foreign investment, and for me, we just have to accept now that there's just big money in it, big rewards, and therefore there is a need for specialist sports lawyers.
We'll always need the lawyers. Thank you, Richard, for that. But we want to open it up now. You've certainly heard a broad range of experiences and skills that the panel can bring to the table. But what I wanted to do now is open it up to you for questions and comments about where sport is. I look at the whole spectrum. You know, in government we were looking at school sport, so making sure that sport was available to school children. Community sport, that people have the opportunity to play on proper playing fields and things like that. And of course, the elite sport, which drives the people to want to be like their stars. And obviously, with the success in GB, with the Olympics and the Paralympics, the success of many of our international sports teams right across the range, I think we've achieved that. We're seen as a sporting nation. But we've got to maintain that. And for cities like Bradford and regions like Yorkshire and for the North, I think sport plays a vital part. So I'll hand it over to you now to ask questions or make comments. What would be helpful is if you give us your name or the organisation you're from and the question you want to raise. Gentleman there.
Hi, my name is Mike McNally. I'm a student teacher and I am interested in Bradford City. I've spoken to Wayne Jacobs in the past, but my question is for Rick Parry. You mentioned other countries, and what can you learn from other countries that you can use in England? Because we aren't doing that bad as it is, really. And the other question is, how does the money from the FA filter through to grassroots and community football?
What can you learn from other countries? I mean, you have to. My philosophy is you have to keep on learning. If you, and I think in football we've perhaps had a reputation for being a little bit arrogant over the years. The whole football's coming home and the home of football thing, which definitely grates in other nations. And I think we can learn in two ways. We can learn from the more established nations. For example, the Germans, who tend to do things with a lot more balance than we do. I think when we set up the Premier League, we knew it would work because we were getting the governance right, and good governance was right at the heart of it. We never envisaged that we'd have more than 70% of the players coming from overseas. We never envisaged that more than half the Premier League clubs would be in foreign ownership. That kind of crept up. And you wouldn't find that in Germany. They have a very successful Bundesliga. Bayern Munich do pretty well in the Champions League. But they also, sadly, managed to do consistently well with the national team. And that's something that we haven't got right. So I think the Germans are always a good model. I think the United States are a good model. They've kind of come from nowhere very rapidly. They bring a different approach. They bring a different mentality. But, you know, all of a sudden now we see their national team getting to the last 8 of World Cups regularly. So they must be doing something right. And I think we'll find we have quite a lot to learn from some of the newer nations. As I said, the Chinese are going to be really interesting. Not doing so well at the moment, but with 1.3 billion people, they're going to find 11 who can play. And they definitely aspire to host the World Cup and eventually to win it. And not sure all their investments at the moment are terribly sound, but I wouldn't bet against them. And I, you know, sadly, whilst I'd love to, I can't answer on behalf of the FA.
I think there is an issue, certainly in my discussions as a sports minister with the FA and indeed the Premier League about how money filters down. I think there's still a long way to go yet. I mean, I think some good work is being done, has been done, but I still think there's some work that still needs to be done. I mean, the TV deals have been great over the years and they're getting better every time, but there seems to be, you know, a blockage for the money going all the way down. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about, you know, what you could do to try and get it further down.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of publicity about the value of the Premier League TV deals, and as a business model it's been incredibly successful, but they don't tend to publicise the expenditure side. And one of the really interesting stats at the moment is that 2 years ago the Premier League wage bill was 2.2 billion euros. The average of the next 3 countries, which was Spain, the big countries, Spain, Italy and Germany, their average wage bill was 1.1 billion, so we're 100% more than the others, and yet we're going downwards in terms of European competition. So, I mean, it's right that money finds its way to the talent, but there's no doubt that some of that money could be diverted and perhaps used more sensibly, and I think that's still one of the challenges for the Premier League.
Thanks, Rick. Paul, boxing, can we learn anything from other countries in terms of what's happening with boxing, or are we doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing okay. I think the probably the most important thing that we can try to do as a national federation now is actually looking upwards and trying to influence within the International Boxing Association. So obviously they had a particularly bad press over some of what went on at the Olympics. our stance is that we need to make this country one of AIBA's stronger partners, hosting more events over here, bringing more business to this country, taking it away from the Stans and from Russia. So at the moment, if you look down the event list for AIBA, you're looking at Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and Russia, and we need to bring more of the event side of things this way. Regarding supporting the grassroots of the sport, boxing being a much smaller sport than football, the work that we do tends to be through club support officers. Our clubs, our 900 clubs in this country, are based predominantly in less affluent areas, and the clubs tend to benefit greatly from supporting how to run a sustainable club, and that keeps a lot of young people active. We're constantly seeking to improve the facilities that they work in, and beacon projects like Bradford College certainly help that as well.
Any more questions? Gentlemen there.
Good afternoon. Simon Shepherd, Liverpool company provides marketing services to businesses. I'm interested to hear the panel's views. The word mentioned a couple of times on integrity in sport. Is there a correlation between business and sport and that matter? At the list here, you can sit here and I'll stop talking about half an hour. As mentioned all the times, they've got drug cheats, they've got the football manager of England seeking money for favours. I could go on forever about people tripping balling, no balls, etc. You tell me. Is there a direct correlation between integrity in sport and business in sport?
Well, if I kick off with that, one of the things I did as Sports Minister was ask Rick to chair a panel to look at the integrity of sports. At that time, nobody thought it was a massive issue. Lots of sports didn't want to recognise the fact that there might be a problem. The gambling companies on the other side were showing irregular betting patterns and things like that. So to pull that together, I asked Rick to get a team of people together who were looking at these issues, and he will speak about that report, I'm sure. Because what worried me was, whilst at that time it wasn't a massive issue, or we didn't think it was a massive issue at that time, the whole integrity of sport was vitally important. Because there we were, attracting the Olympics to London and the Paralympics. We were also trying to get international sports events in the UK so we could have what we called a decade of sport to inspire people. And what worried me was that if the negative side of things came to the forefront and all the press stories were about drug cheats or gambling cheats and things like that, then that could be a real issue. But as time has gone on, we've seen more and more of these scandals. So I'll let you have a little time to reflect, and perhaps, Richard, you might want to talk about how you see it from a legal perspective in terms of what's happening in sport at the moment.
I think it's a very fair point, Simon. I think, business is all about, for me, it's all about integrity. To me, it's non-negotiable. That's just an absolute must. I'm a bit old-fashioned that way. I believe that integrity in any walk of life is critical. I think we do have a problem with sport now, and it's very important as sport is growing as a business, and I think I've read statistics, it's like 3 or 4% of GDP, and are continuing to grow. So there's no doubt sport is going to be here for a long time. It's going to continue to grow. But is it right that those people that are interested in sport pick up the back page or even the front page of the Daily Telegraph and see, from Monday through to Friday, horrific questions, even though it might be slightly exaggerated, even though it might not all be true? Is it good for sport? Is it good for football that we're seeing such negative publicity and this feeling that corruption runs through football? It is bad, and one may say, well, it starts from the top, and we've seen, it's very well documented, we've seen corruption at the highest level at FIFA. They're trying to clean up their act, but if they can't get it right at the top, how can we get it right at the bottom? But I think, in fairness now, I think there is a sea change. I think most governing bodies now are wanting to clean up their acts. There's a realisation that if you're going to grow sport, you're going to attract more money, more sponsors, quality sponsors. Sport has to be clean. And when you see with FIFA organisations like McDonald's or Coca-Cola pulling out a sponsorship, you're taking out huge income streams, but also those income streams are going to have an impact further down the line with grassroots. So you're knocking at an open door here. I think integrity is crucial, and in fairness, I think we are probably, in this country, I think we're under-resourced. I'd have to deal with the Football Association, and there'll be questions, well, why haven't the FA clamped down on this, or why haven't they done that? And often they just haven't got the resources within the Football Association to stamp out integrity, and I know Rick's very heavily involved in that side of it. And there should be much more investment. Instead of footballers earning £250,000 a week, there should perhaps be a levy that goes into making sure that there are proper resources across all sports to stamp out malpractice, to stamp out all sorts of corruption that might be there.
I'll bring Ricky in a minute. I want to, Paul, the refereeing in boxing at the Olympics came into question. I mean, what's your view about that, and what can be done to put things like that right?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, the officiating through the earlier stages of the Rio Games was very good. It's the best I've seen. So that's the ability level of the officials is very high. I think that there's no secret that AIBA had allowed a small elite group to develop and become kind of almost self-governing, and they were suspended during the games and are currently under investigation. I think if you look at where we go with that relies again on us influencing the international federation. So obviously we have to make sure that our own house is in order, but we have to influence the international federation. That means us being a transparent organisation at England Boxing and also GB Boxing, and it means that that we then have to get our own personnel onto AIBA commissions. We have to have a strong say in how referees and judges and other officials are selected and how they're educated as well. And I'm currently talking to AIBA about how we approach that, and instead of at the moment they've just got the one training centre in Kazakhstan. It's difficult to get to. You're going to attract a certain type of country to that. We need to make sure that there are centres all around the world for education, and that the ethics of sport are included in their education. It's not just technically trying to make them better referees and judges. It's really hammering home the fact that the heart and soul of sport lies with them, and it's as simple as that. That without that integrity, without the spectators' belief in the sport, it's nothing.
Well,
Yeah, I think for me, Paul just touched on it there. It's about ethics as well, isn't it? Unfortunately, if we're not careful, sports all become about winning, hasn't it? And win at all costs type of things. And the success, how do you define success? Is it the money that people are making? Is it the lifestyle they're creating for themselves? Sport is sport for me, and it's much more than just winning the ultimate prize. It's how you do that. It's how you represent yourself and the country you're from, or the club you're representing. And until we make that as important as the financial prize at the top of it, or only the winner wins, if you like, then there's always going to be issues, and it's a wider problem than sport, isn't it? It's in society, and we see it at all levels, unfortunately. And I think that we have to look at culture, in all honesty, and sport is a huge part of our culture, but it has no more issues than any other part of culture. And until we look at that, for me, we won't affect it.
Nigel, then I'll bring.
Yes, I suppose looking at grassroots and young people's sport, still forever glass half full. I see massive, fantastic work taking place with junior clubs in schools and so on, and there's fantastic integrity within that. Every time we hear something at national level, every time we pick up the papers and we hear something, that starts chipping away at that and starts chipping away all the time. But it's still not chipped away that much. There is still some fantastic work going on, and I still hold on to that, to the power of what sport can do for local communities, the work that Wayne's doing with 1 in a million and so on. It's great, but there'll come a time, and hopefully we're definitely not there, but we haven't chipped away too much at the moment. But we have to try and get that right at the top. We really do.
So, Mr. Expert, over to you.
No, I'm not an expert, but I could. You'll have to shut me up because I could talk all day on this, and frequently do. I think I'll just make a couple of comments because it's a perfectly valid question, and sport faces a huge challenge. Paradoxically, one of the things I spend a lot of my time doing is talking business schools, groups of businessmen about what they can learn from sports leadership. And when you get it right, when you get a really good high-performing culture in sport, then there's a lot we can learn in business. And for me, what separates the really high-performing cultures from the rest is the importance that they place on strong values. That's a really positive thing we can learn from sport. Conversely, where sport's got a lot to learn from business is in the basic principles of governance. And without going into too much detail, when we set up the Premier League, we were determined to make it fit for purpose, 21st century. So we did the blindingly obvious, very simple. We set it up as an English limited company. So we have independent directors, which was a first in football. The clubs are shareholders, so we're governed by company law, all the various corporate codes. We don't boast about transparency and accountability. It's actually just inbuilt to the structure. If you contrast that with FIFA, and indeed many of the other governing bodies, how are they set up? They're set up as opaque Swiss associations, which is a very nebulous structure. It's probably something you would set up to run the local bowls club, but to run a multi-billion pound industry, it's not fit for purpose. And sadly, FIFA has shifted the integrity deck chairs a little bit recently, but are they committed to change and cleaning things up? Sadly, I fear not.
No, I mean, do you think there's time now, though, for, and you talk about FIFA, but the international bodies as well? It happened to the Olympic Association that they had to change the IOA. What is it, IOA?
IOC.
IOC, sorry, IOC. Is there time now for an independent body to be set up to look at some of the issues that affect sport, whether that be drug cheats, whether that be gambling cheats, or just the actual how sports are run?
I'm not a big fan of an independent body because what would it be? It would be a talking shop, that's for sure, and there's plenty of them at the moment. You could go to a conference every day of the week somewhere on the planet on the integrity of sport. And the problem is that every sport has different rules, different challenges. What separates, for example, match fixing, which makes it unique, is that's all about corrupting to lose. If you're taking drugs, many of the other types of cheating, you're cheating to win. But you can't corrupt to win, you corrupt to lose, and that's a completely different set of challenges. The rules of each sport are different, and the constitution of each sport is different, and essentially I spend more time in the High Court than I spent watching football when we were forming the Premier League, and the reality is, as Richard will know, basically under law, certainly English law, the rules of a sport constitute a contract between the participants. You can't just interpose somebody right over and above that because you can't enforce the rules. I was at a conference in America a couple of weeks ago listening to David Stern, former commissioner of the NBA, where again somebody was suggesting that they need some sort of body in the United States to oversee integrity. He said, well, that's great in theory, but he said we have collective bargaining, we have agreements with the players, we can discipline them, but the idea that you put some body over and above it, he said it would be a complete and utter nightmare, it would invalidate all the contracts. So I don't think I'm in favour of that. What I am in favour of is we need to do more. And the people who could do more, I have to say very, very easily, and I think they're a bit two-faced about it, the people who could do more are the sponsors. They pay lip service to it in FIFA, but one or two that have already been mentioned were very quick to sign up longer contracts when Sepp Blatter called them in. And at the top level, for me, the easiest thing in the world would be for each of the sponsors just to go to the governing bodies and say, a clause in our contract is going to be that you have to adopt the same standards of corporate governance that we have to as public companies. Easy. Solves a lot of the problems overnight. Why they haven't done it, who knows, but that would be one practical solution I would like to see.
Rick, very vocal fans at Liverpool when you were running the club. I mean, would you like their involvement, or what was their involvement?
Yeah, we went through a slightly rocky period with 2 American owners. I mean, again, the German model is quite an interesting one. German model is interesting in all sorts of aspects, but they do have an inbuilt fan share and effectively a veto. You have it in Spain, where the clubs are member-owned. We're not unique, but I mean, again, it's kind of unusual in England that we just have the clubs as limited companies in the hands of single owners, and as I said, what we've now seen is an increasing trend for them to be in foreign ownership, which brings, you know, a whole series of challenges which we haven't even begun to see yet. We'll kind of see that probably in a decade or so. But you know, the further away the owners are, the less accountability there is to the community. And you know, for me, owners of football clubs are custodians, they're stewards. They shouldn't be just beneficial owners. And at the end of the day, even at a more basic level, you know, what can sport learn from business? Well, in business, you put your customers first. And football's kind of unusual in taking, I hate to use the word customers in the football context, and I don't. But just to make the illustration, you know, it's kind of unique. You've got that undying loyalty, but you take them for granted, and you wouldn't do that in any other business.
Okay, another question at the back.
Hi, question for Rick. Do you think what you just spoke about the German model with professional football clubs and the fans' involvement in those clubs, can we in England ever go back to that? Or is it too late? Is it too business-like, too corporate?
To be blunt, I think it's really difficult going backwards, just in practical terms. And, you know, perhaps that's where the FA has failed to show leadership. It's been too reactive. It hasn't looked ahead to consequences. And I said we kind of suddenly wake up and realise half the clubs are in foreign ownership. By that stage, it's incredibly difficult to do anything about it. You can't force them to divest. It's just not going to happen. So I think we've missed opportunities there, and yeah, I think sadly we're probably stuck with what we've got in reality.
Gentlemen.
I just say, I mean, I support Hull City, which Wayne used to play from, but I mean, they've just gone into China to foreign ownership with Chinese people. I know Hull City fans, like the Man City people, they'd rather be top of the league and under foreign ownership than bottom of the league and under local ownership. I don't think overseas ownership is necessarily a bad thing. We're all football fans, we see the team win, get points. If they do it with Chinese ownership, all well and good. Who owns Man City? That's my question.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I don't know who owns Man City. But Wayne, I mean, Bradford City now with the new German owners, I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to have a chat with them at all. I mean, how do you see things going?
Yeah, I think Rick touched on it there, that they come from a culture where they do include and want community involved, and thankfully, although I've not had a formal meeting with our owners yet, I know from little bits of conversation I've had with one of them that's how they see developing our football club, which I'm very proud of, and you know, I think it's to be admired, and I hope it does grow and continue to go forward like that. Maybe it's too late as a whole in the country to go back and go backwards to that model, but I think we still have a chance in our city. If we look at the 2 professional clubs right now, I think the community can play a huge part in it and maybe secure a place in them, and I would certainly hope for that to happen.
Inevitably, we concentrate on football because of the fact that it's our national game. But going back to the spirit and theme of the conference today in terms of what sport can do for communities and for regions, does anybody in the audience have a view about, could we do more? Can sport do more for our communities, for our businesses? I can remember a time working for companies that had their own sports facilities, field packaging in Bradford. We had our own field sports and social club. We were able to do all sorts of different sports. Now many employers don't have that facility. So is there more that business can do to work with sports, or more that business can do in terms of grassroots sports, in terms of development? I don't know, Nigel, if perhaps you've got some views about where companies can actually help grassroots sports and things.
Yes, listen, when you said the roots of a lot of local sports clubs going back 80 to 100 years is local employers or local churches who've put together clubs, and we see many cricket, tennis, bowls clubs, and some good structure from there from 80 years ago and so on. And over time, they've been overtaken and they've been run themselves. One of the biggest issues we've got over the next few years is our voluntary sport club structure, which is relying on obviously volunteers, and it's an older volunteers and there's less volunteers around and so on. And I do have concern about that structure going forward. The other concern we've got is not just business, and business get involved in that, is PE and school sport, and the direction that's going at the moment, especially in the secondary schools, where we're struggling really with the number of PE teachers and the amount of time spent and so on. So there's real challenges there, as we are going on. And businesses have got a real role to play in that local community to get involved. And it'd be fantastic if we could pick that up again, if we could pick that role of the business in the local community, working with the local schools and working with the local sports clubs to put those opportunities on. That's the direction really would be good if we need to, in the future we can get there.
Paul, boxing, business and boxing, I mean, what's the sort of business support and voluntary support you get with boxing?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, we've got 900 clubs around the country, and that's the grassroots of our sport. There's a lot of low-level local business sponsorship. A lot of clubs do get some support from businesses. I guess I'd like to see that extend to not just being a bit of money for kit, but to actually start getting people actually start thinking about getting staff involved with clubs. Maybe even the clubs are being allowed to come along and present to the workforce of the businesses. So actually see more of a link there, because a lot of the time, and as we were just saying from a CSP point of view, one of the big worries is that we haven't got volunteers going into the future. So it'd be a great thing if people can talk about more than just a few quid or going all the way up to the big sponsorships, but actually start to build on that volunteer culture.
Richard, you work in a rich city, Leeds, lots of money in Leeds. How much of it is going into sports?
Probably not enough. I mean, obviously, they all say, you've got to get, the kids off the PlayStations and get them participating. I think the rot set in many years ago when school fields were sold off for other purposes. And I think, we need to get kids involved. It's very challenging because there are a lot more opportunities for kids these days. Certainly, as we get into the winter months, it becomes less attractive. But, the one thing is that, I think we are a country that has sport in our heart. And it's very, very important that I think parents and teachers do really bestow to the children the importance of sport. I think, let's look at the good side of things. How great it was to see what happened in the Olympic Games. So we've had now 2 Olympic Games. Thankfully, we have recognised these, great achievements across Paralympics and the main Olympics. Leeds had a big sort of fanfare exhibition about 3-4 weeks ago, Manchester last week, and we need to make these great Olympians, whether it's Paralympics or Olympics, we need to make them heroes. And often, you often see the stories of what makes a great champion now is they've had a role model and they've seen somebody running, playing judo, swimming or whatever, which has given them the inspiration. And I think we should do a lot more to really send a signal out, say that, sport is a massive part of our country and can be hugely satisfying. And taking away all the money, that's the great thing about the Olympics. And, I looked at I'm a keen golfer myself, and when you looked at the way Justin Rose won his gold medal, it was almost as bigger an event for him as it would be winning a major, or when Andy Murray got his gold medal, no money involved, but almost that was kind of a bit of a turning point, that he went to Wimbledon, crowd got behind him, gold medal, no money involved. And that again shows how important it is, not just about the money, but about the participation and, you know, letting these guys become role models and let the young kids aspire to participate in the next Olympic Games in 12 years' time or whenever it may be.
Rick, good employers looking after their workforce, playing their part with sport, what do you think could happen?
Well, I mean, years ago, it's a long time ago, when I was playing football at a reasonable level, it was teams like Vauxhall, Shell, Camel Laird, most of which have now disappeared completely, which is a sad thing. Good friend of mine is kind of doing something really interesting at the moment. He's got a very successful business, passionate about his workforce, involving the workforce, and what he's actually doing is sponsoring a lot of young, aspiring athletes, and he's got people from within the business mentoring, providing guidance. He brings the kids in to talk to them, and he's finding that really inspiring. So it's not always just about cash or money. There are ways in which sport can become engaged with business and business engaged with sport if there's a bit of imagination.
Exactly, and I think the idea of volunteering, you know, businesses putting people back in from their business into the community is a good idea. When, obviously with the charity and all that, business is important to you to keep you going and supporting you, so that there's a responsibility on businesses.
Yeah, as you say there, Gerry, we've got 38 corporate partners now involved with the charity. On more than one front involved with sport and physical activity, obviously helping us to support, as we support children and young people in those pathways, but also those businesses and their employees taking part in physical activity, raising finances and their well-being and the well-being of their companies, and using them, those get-togethers to team build, etc. Lots and lots of positives, and really heavily involved.
John Grogan.
Yeah, just quickly, should sports company knowledge be just left to sell their TV rights as they want, or given the amount of public support money that goes into sport, and given the need to inspire future generations so they can see people like Andy Murray and Justin Rose, is it right that we have a law, as we do, that makes sure that some events like the Olympics and the World Cup are on free to air TV?
That's an old chestnut. Rick.
I think you're better placed than me on that one, Gerry. But
Well, I'll have a crack at it in the sense of I do and did believe that we ought to keep some events on terrestrial TV at the time that terrestrial TV was important in terms of you know, the test matches, the Rugby League Cup final, the FA Cup final, all of that. The problem now, I think, John, is technology's changed so much that people, particularly youngsters, watch things through their phones or through computers and things like that. And I think it's more difficult now to make laws like that. But I think the principle's right, that if you don't see a sport, and because the opportunities now are so wide in terms of, when I went to school, if you were a boy, you played football, cricket and rugby. If you were a girl, you played netball and hockey. The sports opportunity now is so wide. You know, I think some of the sports have got to be a bit careful, you know, to look at themselves about their reach in terms of how they get there. But I think it's more difficult now to have a law that says it has to be on terrestrial TV. So that's my stab at it. Rick, I'll let you go next.
yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, the tricky balance is you're depriving sports from maximising their income.
Yeah.
I think we'll see the Olympic Games move more towards satellite television across the world. And as you said, TV as a medium is becoming, you know, gradually less relevant. Social media, and sport should be smarter, because, you know, that's a relatively inexpensive medium for them to be communicating their messages. They should be a lot more proactive. Some are doing a lot better than others, but, you know, the ability to make use of YouTube, to make use of Twitter, to make use of Facebook, Snapchat, this is where sport needs to be smarter.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, they call them the crown jewels, don't they? And I think, you know, we're seeing that being sort of dissipated away. I found it quite sad in a way this year that although the BBC had one more year left on the British Open golf, They decided to throw the towel in even a year earlier, gave it to Sky. So that's just another crown jewel gone. You know, well, what's next? Is it Wimbledon that will go next? We don't know. I mean, the cricket's practically gone anyway. So very, very hard. And of course, sports don't want to be left behind in terms of the income generator that's there. And unfortunately, terrestrial television just cannot compete in a expanding market. Now, obviously, Sky have got a lot of competition with BT Sports, and you know, there's rumours that Google are going to come in soon, start broadcasting, and as soon as the big boys come in like that, you just, you know, despite how strong and passionate you'd feel about it, I just think it's just a fact of life that you know, money will talk the language.
All the big fights are on Sky and you know, BT and all that now. Sort of.
Yeah, and we've got Box Nation as well. I think from as the sheer amount of boxing content that is available, and I'm talking mostly about Olympic and amateur boxing content, is phenomenal now. And I just a couple of weeks ago, I was watching live the women's or the female juniors and youth championships from Turkey. So the amount that people can watch live and recorded on our England Boxing YouTube channel is fantastic. But the days are gone, we have to accept as a national governing body that the days are gone when we could get a half-hour slot on the Friday night before the cup final for the ABA finals on the BBC. That's not going to happen again.
Rick, you want to say something?
Yeah, just one sentence, which is a stat that I find really interesting, picking up one of Richard's points. The partnership between the Premier League and Sky has been very successful, and it's worked, but it's been good for both. So not only is Sky generating £1 billion a year for the Premier League, it's also generating £1 billion a year in profit for itself. Sky's been immensely successful. But it's done that on the back of 10.5 million subscribers, which you know, you might think in the context of Britain's quite a lot. Apple are now selling 500 million iPads every year. You know, that is a stunning comparison. Sky can make $1 billion out of sport, 10.5 million subscribers. Apple, just leave that for dead. So, you know, within the next 10 years, will we see Apple, will we see Google, will we see Netflix coming into live sport? And if they do, by the way, it won't be national boundaries because these are worldwide companies. So, food for thought.
Have we lost the traditional approach?
I think everything moves on, doesn't it? Everything progresses, and in the world that we're talking about, there's been immense progress, hasn't there, over the last few years in information and technology. So it's how we harness it and use it for the greater good and not fight against it, for me.
Okay, right, we're now coming towards the end of the session. Is there any one burning question? Gentleman there.
For the whole panel, I mean, is it possible to bring Bradford a sports destination city? And if so, how?
Right. So,
Do you want to go first?
Possible to make, sorry,
Bradford a sports destination city.
sports destination city. It's certainly got the, when we look at the walking, the cycling, the running routes and so on, we've got masses to actually sell in Bradford, and we've got the natural landscape in the Bradford district to do so. We're also starting to try to event. A few hours ago it was announced that Bradford is going to be one of the host towns for the start or finish for the Tour de Yorkshire, and then there's the ICU World Championships and so on that might come there. So we're starting to now get some of the international events and some of the national events coming through the city, so most certainly in that. We need to ramp up some of the other, we've got on Sunday, John at the back is organising the city runs and so on. They bring a fantastic profile. We need to do more events like that. It's a natural environment. We haven't got the built facilities like some of the cities have, which will always be an issue for us in terms of international competition and national competition. But if we can use the natural environment and what we have in Bradford to the best extent, then yes, we can be a destination city. Yes.
When?
Yeah, I think just to say it links in a little bit, but just to let people know, obviously as a city, we are really passionate about sport and physical activity, and we do want it to become a destination for people. We want it to become first and foremost established and delivering wonderful things for the people that live in our region, to improve improve the region's well-being in terms of the economy and people's actual health and well-being. But if I may, Gerry, we've got an organisation called Active Bradford, which is a partnership of organisations coming together to set the strategy for sport and physical activity in our city. It'll take a life course approach, so looking at early years, children and young people, adults and older adults, to make sure nobody's missed. And its job really is to improve participation levels and to improve the participation experience as well. We want to encourage all people, wherever they live in our region, so it's our job to look at, is there any gaps in any of the constituencies, where are they, what is good, what is indifferent, and what could be better, and how do we improve it? How do we connect all that to improve it for the region? That's a big thing, so we're right from facilities to curriculum, equipment, staff, the communication of all that. How do we make that better for our region? And that's what that group is responsible for. So you might have seen some things recently as we rightly so lift. I was talking to Paul earlier on this. We have some outstanding world-class boxers coming out of this city, and people don't know. If you live in Bradford, you could do a poll, I guess, and you will not. Most people will be unaware of the great things that are happening. It's our role to pull all that together, and some that need developing, and to make sure that sport is sat where it should be in our city, because it does have a huge part to play, and it should be a destination. Talked on school games and what's happening there. Last year in Bradford we had successful summer games, winter games for schools, lots of children and young people taking part in that. The city runs, as we mentioned, cycling with the tour and everything that's brought. A PE conference we put on in Bradford, and at our first Bradford Sports Awards. So in this actual arena there is lots happening, and there's lots to do, but there's lots happening, and we're quite excited about the next 5 to 10 years.
On Saturday we've got the Get Out and Get Active launch of disability sport. We've got the Disability Minister here in Bradford on Saturday. Disability sport is massive here in Bradford in terms of leading the way. Paul, from your perspective, Bradford destination?
Yeah, absolutely. I think boxing is a case in point. If you pick the right sports, the right activities, and following on from what Nigel and Wayne were saying, do what you can do. If you can't build Wembley and an Olympic-sized swimming pool in Bradford kind of next week, but what you can do is work with those sports that use what Bradford's got and the facilities Bradford's got available. I've found it to be a really nurturing environment. Once I'd shown that we were going to stay here with the Boxing Academy beyond the first year, and that we were around to stay, I found it a very, very supportive environment for sport. And as Wayne said, we've got a conveyor belt of top boxers coming through. If I was going to pick holes at all, I'd say Bradford doesn't shout loud enough about what it does well.
Richard, Bradford, Leeds, Yorkshire, destination for sport?
Why not? I mean, Manchester did it. Obviously, they pitched and they got it for the Commonwealth Games many years ago, and they've capitalised on that. I remember one Saturday I went to Manchester. There was Manchester City were playing at home at lunchtime, 50,000 people. There was the Super League Grand Final at Old Trafford, 75,000 people. And in the evening there was World Championship Boxing at the MEN Arena. That's 100,000 people all coming to a city in a space of 12 hours. Look at the income that can generate. So I'm very passionate. If Bradford really wants to do it, they do it. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Rick, Northern Powerhouse, sport play its part in that?
Oh, absolutely, because, I mean, sport is an area where you look right across the region, we're strong. We've got, we've got Premier League clubs at the eastern end of the M62, and clubs at the other end, so, absolutely, why not?
And aspiring to do that.
Yeah.
Good. Right, well, thank you very much. Can I ask you to thank the panel in the usual way? Thank you very much. Thank you for attending, and declare this session closed. Thank you very much. Thank you.